Hey guys, so we've got a little leg workout for you today. Just going through some basic fundamentals of a good leg day. Nothing crazy, it's not a huge throw your weights around motivation video, but it's just trying to get you really understanding some concepts to make your leg training better, and also some stuff how to personalize certain movements to you. As obviously I'm a taller guy, and if you're any of those restrictions, we want to make sure that you're personalizing to you. So making sure you can get that depth in the squat, making sure that you're getting the right angle in the leg press, that sort of stuff. So I hope you take some really good information out of this and it can apply to your own workout. See you there.
Alright, so we're going to start off with a activation on the hamstrings. What you can see I'm doing here is just flexing from my knee, so I'm shortening that hamstring from the knee joint, and then I'm curling it back and fully shortening it from the hip. So both the hamstring joins over both the knee and the hip. So by doing this exercise, we're fully shortening from both ends. If you're doing this properly, you're going to be really weak in that range, so you're not going to need a huge amount of weight to get you there. So take your time to feel this, build some really awareness for how that muscle works, and then we can get right into it. Now, there's a real luxury of having this exercise or this machine in my gym. If you don't have it, we can always substitute it for facing in on a leg extension. That works really well, and I've used that quite a bit too. Strength curve on that's usually quite nice, but what this allows me to do a little bit further is just lock that hip down, make sure that nothing else in my glute is moving, and then same as that activation, we're just trying to get that hamstring fully short to allow nothing but the hamstring to do the work, really make sure we can drive some blood in there. The reason we're starting the workout with this is we're really making sure that our hips are nice and mobile, everything's nice and warm, and that everything from the back of our knee is able to support our squats a little further. So our second exercise on this will be squats. So just really getting some blood into our hamstrings and making sure that we're aware of how those hips feel and getting that nice and sort of locked in will be really important when we start getting into squats. Once I've done a couple sets here, we're going to go into a lying leg curl. This is a pretty standard exercise, hopefully in most gyms, but with the same focus of just trying to make sure our hips are locked down. So I'm trying a little bit of a different variation on this one, where you can just see it on this frame, but I'm keeping my toes down, pulling towards my knee on the way up. So I'm lengthening my calf and allowing it a little bit easier on the way up, and then I'm pointing my toe here to shorten my calf and make it a little bit harder on the way down. All that's doing is loading the eccentric a little bit more, make it a little bit harder on my hamstrings on the way down. If locking your hips down is pretty hard to do, just focus on that and try to keep your toes pulled in towards your knee. Keep the calf lengthened, make sure it's not doing too much work, because that gastroc can do a lot of knee flexion, so ideally just keep it out of the movement. Now this next part we're going to go through with our squats is really important. I want you to take note depending on your structure. So for me, I've got a longer femur, the distance I have to travel down is quite a lot. So if we go shoulder width starts and just come down, you can see the angle of my torso in comparison to my shin is quite a lot, and I'm bending more from my hips. So what I mean by that is I'm using my glutes more than I'd probably be using my knees. Now we're going to adjust this to a wider stance, driving my knees out, and we're going to be relatively even here. So you can see the angle of my shin to the torso is now pretty even. So this will probably be one of my stronger stances, where I'm bending from my knee and my hip about the same. Which, if I'm doing a heavy squat, which is not necessarily today's focus, but would be what I would come back to as being an optimal balanced squat. Now this third one, we're going to be going back to a relatively narrow stance, but we're elevating the heels. So we're taking away any restriction the ankle has there and allowing ourselves to push our knees further over our toe. So you can now see the angle of the shin is greater than the angle of my torso, which is really allowing my knees to flex more and make sure my quads are doing all the work. So if you're, depending on what muscle you're trying to work and what you're trying to achieve there, would dictate what stance you do that. So just keep that in mind, and that will change depending on your structure as well. Alright, so what that should also allow is give you a little assessment of what your depth should be like. So once we start chucking a bit of weight on here, we shouldn't be using the weight to push ourselves down any lower than we should naturally go. So use those first warm-up sets to really get an idea of what your hip mobility is like on that day, so that when you get into the top sets, you're not trying to push further than you should be going. So we're just building this weight up slowly, making sure that everything's feeling good, allowing us, the tempo on this shouldn't really change. Top set, I think we start pushing a little bit harder, but we're just trying to make sure we're spending the most amount of time in the position where it's hardest, or at least we're going to get the greatest benefit from this movement. So you can see I'm going to spend a bit more time not exactly holding, but really slowing it down at the bottom of the movement, and I'm getting straight out of that at the top. So I'm not pausing and resting at the top of the movement. I'm just focusing on pulling myself down and holding that position at the bottom and really driving out hard with my quads. I'm not allowing my glutes to come back. A really easy part of this, or at least a very common part of squats, is you'll see everyone driving their ass back when they come up, which from a powerlifting perspective is, you're going to be nice and strong and go do that if that's your goal. But if you're trying to keep tension on your quads, we really want to make sure that's when you're driving into the ground and keeping your body nice and stable. So just be aware of that. Make sure you're focusing on the muscle when you're not just trying to lift that weight. I think this is coming up to my heaviest set on these squats. But the reason I kept this rest period in here is just trying to show you that my rest periods was nothing. I think I was bang on a minute. I was still keeping it nice and short. I'm not here to be a powerlifter. I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting some work done and making sure the muscles are the one that really feed on the work. So just be aware of that when you start doing bigger movements, because we're not just here to lift for weight. We want to make sure those quads are really the ones doing the work. And you can see I have gone with the heels elevated squat on this, so obviously this probably isn't quite my strongest weight, but it is trying to keep it on my quads, and it was pretty tough on this last set. Now this back position, quick note on this one. Usually with squats, it's not generally your legs that fail first, and hence why I really like a hack squat. It's your back. So trying to make sure we stabilize that and make sure that's locked down so nothing else moves is a really important factor of your top level of your squats. Now you can see with this top weight I'm not getting any lower. I'm still driving with the quads and not letting my ass drive back. So everything's in the same spot, and really that tempo, maybe a little bit more pause at the top, but overall it's the same controlled movement. Alright, and then there's only 2 exercises left to go. It's a pretty standard workout, just trying to make sure we're hitting all the angles. But this leg extension is a little different, and you can see here I'm adding in a belt here. So it's just typical me trying to make exercises harder, but also make sure that making them as effective as possible. Leg extensions, most people are going to assume that they're relatively stable, but everyone still bounces around on their ass when they're doing these movements. So the idea of the belt is just to make sure we can really lock our ass down to the seat and make sure nothing from the hip is moving. So we're fully shortening that quad by pulling, obviously we're extending our knee, but we're making sure that from the hip we're nice and stable as well. So we're just trying to get a bit of a contraction at the top, really pull that quad back towards the hip and make sure we get a nice little squeeze at the top. So I'm keeping again this single leg just to make sure I'm getting the even amount of work on each side, because every machine I try seems to have a bit of a twist and you're always feeling one leg more than the other. And also as you get bigger legs, you'll start to feel like you can't keep your knees in line, generally because your adductors or your quads will start getting in the way, and you feel like going straight from your hips is a little bit hard to achieve, so quite a nice way around that. And then last exercise on here was just a nice leg press. I really like this hammer strength one, very smooth and a nice wide pad. I didn't put a huge amount of weight on this today. Quads are feeling great. Everything I'd done before this was really working. And I think in the past I've racked this leg press up with 16 plus plates aside, but today the goal was just trying to keep constant tension on the quads. I'm really driving my toes towards the ceiling and just making sure there's nothing but my quads doing the work. So keeping a consistent tempo, just keeping that moving, really started to burn really quickly, and it was a really good exercise. Same thing again here, make sure you're only going as low as your hips allow. So we're not allowing for any rotation from the pelvis, we're just keeping them locked right down. So that's it guys, I hope that was an awesome workout. Just taking you through those basic fundamentals like I said. I hope that's of huge value. See ya.